Good morning, fifth grade. Today we're going to continue studying the Mexican Revolution. Before we get started, we have a quick write. It says, why do people from other countries immigrate to the United States? Press pause to write down your answer and play when you're ready for the focus question. Today we want to know, what caused the Mexican Revolution? How did the Mexican Revolution affect people in Mexico? And the standard we're going to be working with today is explaining the relationship between the Mexican Revolution and Mexican immigration into the United States. Our vocabulary words for today are hacienda, and that's a large estate or a plantation. So a wealthy person would live in a hacienda. The next word is overthrow, and that's when you remove someone from power by force. All right, so this would be an example. And then the last word is dictator, and that is someone who there's one person has total power over the whole country. They are the only person that makes the decisions. They're a dictator. And so it's like, someone being the boss of everyone. Go ahead and turn the page. And for our first box, we have a trailer of a movie called The Storm That Swept Mexico. And we want to know, why is this the title of the movie? What is the storm that swept Mexico? Is it an actual storm? All right, let's watch.
Tierra, agua, libertad, justicia y ley.
All right, so our question asks us, what is the storm that swept Mexico? And we know that in box 1 we would write, the storm that swept Mexico was the first movie to ever feature an actual revolution. Press pause to write down your answer and play when you're ready for box 2. So one of the generals that we're going to read about in Guided Reading, Pancho Villa, he actually agreed to let Hollywood in the United States film some of his battles to use in movies. So they weren't actually actors, it was like real people fighting in a battle and dying. All right. For the rest of the boxes, we're going to be reading this text, and in parallel teaching, you'll be able to fill out your timeline. All right, so let's get started with the Mexican War. The Mexican War had ended, but Mexico's problems were far from over. Mexicans were upset over the American victory, and the economy was weak. Benito Juarez and other leaders tried to make reforms, but the people disagreed on what changes to make. A civil war called the War of Reform broke out. In 1863, France invaded and took control of Mexico. 4 years later, the Mexicans regained control of their country. In 1876, Porfirio Diaz became the country's president. Under his leadership, Mexico's economy improved. Railroads were built and industry expanded. But workers received low wages, and many Mexicans lost their land to wealthy landowners. As a result, most Mexicans were very poor, and many migrated to the United States to find work. Farmers and workers took up arms to overthrow the government in 1910, beginning the Mexican Revolution. Groups led by Emiliano Zapata and Francisco Pancho Villa fought against the government. Thousands of Mexicans fled north to the United States. This wave of immigration continued until the 1930s. In 1917, Mexico finally wrote a new constitution. During the 1920s, the government began many economic reforms. Then, in 1928, the National Revolutionary Party took control of the government. It ruled Mexico for the next 70 years. All right, let's go to our questions. 2A says, who won the Mexican-American War? And if we go back to the first paragraph, it says that the Mexicans were upset over the American victory, which means that the United States won the Mexican-American War. Press pause to write down your answer and play when you're ready for 2B. What happened in Mexico as a result of the Mexican War? If we go back into paragraph 1, it tells us that the economy was weak and a civil war called the War of Reform broke out. You need to write those two sentences in part 2B. Press pause to write down your answer and play when you're ready for box 3. It says, how did Porfirio Diaz's leadership affect Mexican workers? And if we go into the second paragraph, it says that the workers received low wages, and many Mexicans lost their land to wealthy landowners. Write that sentence in box 3A. Press pause to write down your answer and play when you're ready for 3B. How did the Mexican workers respond to these challenges? And in the second paragraph it says, as a result, most Mexicans were very poor and many migrated to the United States to find work. Write that sentence in 3B. Press pause to write down your answer and play when you're ready for box 4. It says, why did thousands of Mexicans immigrate to the United States in 1910? And in the third paragraph, it tells us that in 1910, the Mexican Revolution began. And that's when thousands of Mexicans fled to the United States. So that means they immigrated to the United States to escape the dangerous war. In box 4, you would write, Emiliano Zapata and Francisco Pancho Villa led the Mexican Revolution to overthrow the government, making Mexico a dangerous place to live. Press pause to write down your answer and play when you're ready for 4B. It says, was the new Constitution and economic reforms in the 1920s effective? Why or why not? And if we go back into the last paragraph, it says that in 1917 they wrote a new Constitution, and then a couple of years later the government began making these reforms. But if we look back into that third paragraph, we know that many Mexicans are still immigrating to the United States during this time where Mexico has a new constitution and economic reforms. So that tells us that because Mexicans were still fleeing to the United States, they didn't trust this new government yet. And so in box 4B, we would write, the new constitution and economic reforms were not effective because many Mexicans still immigrated to the United States after they were passed, and the government only lasted for 70 years. Press pause to write down your answer and play when you're ready for the paragraph. It says, what caused the Mexican Revolution? How did the Mexican Revolution affect people in Mexico?